Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to be doing a loose floral painting using only one color of watercolor paint, and we are going to play in different saturation levels, which is really going to make your painting beautiful even though you're only using one color. So just to start off, I want to explain really quick about composition. Whenever I do paintings like these, I never sketch everything out. I just kind of let it flow. It's actually a really meditative practice, and it's something that I know that personally I don't sell artwork like this because it's not really my typical like signature style, but I love doing it because it takes my mind off of being so focused on making money off of my art, because this is just something I like to do for fun. So that's why I'm going to share this with you today. And I want to start off by talking about composition a little bit. Since we aren't sketching out the flowers when we start, it's really important that we kind of have an idea what kind of flowers and leaves that we're going to use. You don't always have to have an idea, but when you get started, sometimes it can feel daunting if you don't know what kind of flowers you're going to be putting on the paper. I've already picked out our blooms for today, so it's very important in your composition, especially when we are using only one color, to have different sizes. So I like to call these guys my big blooms. This maybe would be like an Icelandic poppy. Then we have our supporting blooms, which are going to be smaller. I know they're not really that much smaller on here, but they will be. Then we have our fillers. So these are really small, maybe like chamomile flowers or forget-me-nots. And then these guys that kind of remind me of like wisteria in a way, or little berries. Then we have our leaves, and we have some various forms of leaves here. And then we have a bud, which sometimes I don't need to use this, but I like to have it just in case. Wanted to show you that these are the florals that we'll be using today. Let's get started. The supplies that we'll need is, you really only need one water cup, but if you want to, you can totally have two. And then you are going to need watercolor paper. If you are not working on a watercolor block, please make sure to tape your paper down. You could use washi tape, also like artist's masking tape, to tape your paper down to your surface. The reason we want to do this is because we're going to be using a lot of water, and your paper will buckle and warp, and it will kind of be a mess. So we want a flat surface. My favorite, of course, is watercolor blocks, but if you don't have one, you can totally tape your paper down to your surface as well. We are using one watercolor paint today, so use whatever color you want. I'm going to be using this Opera Rose color, but again, you can use any color. You can even use black, because we are going to be working in varying saturation levels today. And then as far as brushes go, I am probably going to be working mostly with my size 6, because this brush has a really nice tip on it. But if you have a brush that maybe doesn't have the best tip, you can use this for larger blooms, but then you're going to want something smaller like a 2 or a 1 for fine details. And then I have my size 8 out just in case, because I might want to use that one today as well. Another real quick note, I know we talked about the way that our painting is going to look interesting is because we have varying sizes with our florals and our leaves. But another reason it's going to look interesting is because we're going to vary the saturation levels. This would not look good if we just used the same saturation level of pink, since we're only using one color. So we want to vary it. As you can see, this is very, very light saturation, super light pink here. I've added a lot of water to this. These are more saturated. And then of course, our most saturated is the little detail lines that we've put into our flowers, the pollen in the middle, and then some of our leaves are going to be a lot more saturated. My watercolor block is a 9-inch by 12-inch, which is a little too big for me today. I'm going to use some washi tape to get a little rectangle here, and I'm going to go about like 8 by 10 or 7 by 9. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you are working with a larger size like I am, you might want to just tape off your paper a little bit, because it can feel a little bit daunting sometimes if your paper is too huge. So If we had a ton of time, like a couple hours, then maybe we would make it a little bit larger, but I'm just gonna get rid of a little bit of this space by just using some washi tape. This washi tape is so cute. It's from the pigeon litters and it has little pigeons on it. Okay. And we are going to be using both wet on wet and wet on dry techniques today, which is very typical for watercolor. You really kind of need both. Okay, so just make sure if you are using tape to make it a smaller area that it's just nice and pressed down. All right, let's get started. The first area that I like to start in is the upper left, and I like to work my way down. But I am right-handed. If you are left-handed, you might want to start on this corner, but just try it and see. It's probably going to be easier to follow me. I'm wetting my brush and I'm coming over here to my pigment over here. And I am going to get a medium saturation level. I would say my paint is kind of melted butter texture. Load up my brush. You never want your brush to be dripping. If it is, lightly tap it on a paper towel. I always have a paper towel because no matter what, I always need to get rid of some of my paint sometimes. So we're starting in the upper left, and I am going to make that first petal. So I have the tip of my brush and then I'm pressing down, kind of using the belly of the brush to create that nice petal shape. And again, I want to make this little cup right here. I'm going to leave a space between this petal and the cup because that's where I'm going to put the little pollen. Just making that nice C curve. If your paint is not moving, add water. These are brand new brushes, so they are needing a little extra water today. Okay, and then we're gonna put our other petal. So again, the tip of my brush, and then I'm pressing down to kind of flatten it out. Just adding some water. And this one, I can tell I made this side a little too close to the edge, but that's okay. We'll just make this petal shorter. And then I want to put one more petal right here, but it's kind of a side view, so I'm just curving it up. And if you want, take a little more saturated paint and lightly tap it in, because your flower is really wet right now. So if we tap in some additional saturation of that paint, it'll kind of flow nicely. Okay, now my rule with composition is I really like the S shape. I think it really draws your eye in. And I like to think of my painting think of it as a scale. You never want, or you know, one of those scales like the Libra astrological sign has, you always want it to feel even in your painting. So if I do all my big blooms over here and then I have none of those big blooms down here, it's gonna feel really uneven. What I like to do is I kind of like to do an S shape. I would put one probably here. Now I don't want to put it exactly in the same spot right here because that's almost too even. So I'm gonna move it down here. Just in my mind, I like to think, where are my biggest blooms gonna be? I'm gonna do one here, probably here, here, and here. I don't have to paint them right now, but I at least have that idea in my mind as I start to work through my composition. Now I want to grab something else, maybe one of these smaller supporting blooms. I know I'm going to have a big bloom right here, but I want to put something right here. I'm going to do that one that kind of looks like a daisy. And I'm grabbing, again, that kind of melted butter texture paint. I am using the tip of my brush, and I'm going to have it kind of in this corner. Tip of my brush, and then I'm going to fan out and turn it back on itself. So that nice teardrop. And don't be afraid to vary the saturation. This is the one we're going for, guys. And you can touch the other petals, it's okay. And do one more. They can touch, and you can also grab a little more saturation in your paint for some of these. Awesome. Now I want to put some nice leaves. And how we do leaves, we're gonna do them a couple different ways, but I wanna put a big leaf right here, and I'm going to grab my paint. Again, it's kind of that medium saturation level. You know what? I'm gonna water it down a little bit more. You're going to press, or the tip of your brush, and then press it down. And then you're gonna go on the other side and press it down. Now this is pretty light. I might have it touch that a little bit. And I think I wanna do one other leaf. So again, I'm just using the tip, and then I'm pressing down and lifting up to get that nice tip. Perfect. We are going to be adding details once these dry, but right now we're just using our wet on wet method. Now this area right here needs some filler. So I'm gonna look at, what are my fillers? They're these guys and these little daisy kind of things. So let's do the little daisies. I want the lightest, very, very lightest saturation I can get out of this. Almost looks like it's invisible on my paper, but it's not, don't worry. Lots and lots of water, but we never are letting our brush drip. We just have lots of water. And I'm just making these little circles with the tip of my brush. And some of them I'm just gonna do one circle because it'll be a little bud. And you might be having a really hard time seeing this right now. It's really, really light. Don't worry, it'll be clear in a second. So just add those fillers in. And we have leaves as well. This is your very lightest saturation level, as light as you can go and still see it. Remember, watercolor does usually dry lighter than what you see when it's wet. And sometimes you could just do 3, like kind of like this, it kind of blended together. So it's like a side view. Awesome. I'm gonna let these dry just a smidge before I go in because I don't want it to bleed too much. And then we are going to think about our next big bloom. I'm going to put that about right here. And this time I'm gonna open up the flower. I'm grabbing a medium tone. I'm just thinking for 1 second, okay. So a medium tone, and we wanna do a leaf just like this one. So point, pull around. I like to do a little divot, and then I'm just filling it in. Same thing, we're going all the way around. We are going to have 5 petals. They all kind of meet in the middle here. Just get a little more saturation because this guy is getting pretty light. Whenever you do this exercise, when you're doing just one color, I recommend that you use the one color straight out of the tube, that you don't try to mix your own color, because what happens if you do that is you're bound to not mix it completely, and so you'll end up getting color variation. That is because you're mixing 2 colors. I mean, that's not wrong. You could totally do that, but I think it's a really good practice to just try with one color. It really forces you to focus super hardcore. And now that I'm looking at this a little bit more, I can see that because these blooms are so big, if we have 5 on here, it's gonna be gigantic. So I'm just gonna do another one here probably instead of that full S that I was talking about earlier. Like I said, when you're working on composition, think of it as a scale. You want it to feel balanced in all areas. You don't want your eye to be drawn to just one area. It should feel very comprehensive, like you look at it and it just flows. That takes practice though, you guys. So if you don't get it on the first time, don't worry. Now I'm coming in here with my very, very deepest saturation. I'm just going straight for that paint. It's almost like sticky. It's so saturated. And just the very tip of my brush. And I'm gonna come in to make these nice little lines and then the little pollen in the middle and our little leaves. So I'll connect these just with some lines. So this is the bottom of the bud, so it's gonna connect. It doesn't have to be perfect though, you guys, just, you know, make it look good, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And I like to do some other lines kind of over here to fill the space. Go back, you super saturated, and do little dots. If these are still wet, you get the most beautiful pops of color kind of bleeding in. I love that so much. That's where the meditative part of this really comes in, I think. I love that. So little dots, it's great if it bleeds. If it doesn't, that's fine too. If you want it to bleed though, just get to it before it dries. Now I am going to grab super saturated again and just the tip of my brush, and I want to make those tiny little leaves. Now, if you're struggling, your brush doesn't have a good tip on it, then go down a size, maybe to size 2. I'm just using the very tip of my brush and I'm pressing down. It's the tiniest, I gotta move this, the tiniest little press to make these little teeny leaves. Some of them you can drag a little bit if you want to, but they're just really little. And I'm gonna make some lines right here because it kind of needs a little something over here. And just filling in with these little leaves. Sometimes the tiniest little mark can make your paintings look so good. That's what this practice with this kind of painting has really taught me, is the smallest things can enhance your paintings. All right, that looks good. I am going to make some, let's put some leaves in here. So I really love these ones. I think they look so pretty. And I think they'd look great if they were coming out this way. I'm grabbing that medium saturation level for the twig that the leaves will be on. Just using the tip of my brush. Okay, now I'm going to do really light saturation because we have some heavier saturation in here and we have light right here. So I think to balance it out, it'd look really good if there was really light saturation over here. For these leaves, it's the same thing that we just did. So we're going to point, press down, pull up to make that nice diamond shape. So point, press down, pull up, and then point, press down, and pull up. And you want to have some movement. So we don't want them all to be like tuk, 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 exactly the same. I'm gonna make this one kind of come in more. And these will really pop when we come back and they're dry and add in that really saturated line. This is such a good practice. I remember when I first did one of these, I thought, oh my God, this is gonna be so ugly. And it turned out really good. Okay, I want to add in some little fillers. We're gonna make this, I guess it's wisteria, but I'm going to make it just a little more saturated. And I'm literally just like painting these little fluffy kind of like balls. And it's okay if they touch the leaves. That's okay. And it's okay if they touch the flower. I just want them to fill in this area a little bit. We're gonna give it just a tiny millisecond to dry, and then we're gonna come in and add some of those more saturated areas. I think I'm going to take these leaves and also put them over here. So the branch is gonna kind of curve up. Then we have our lightest saturation. And remember, you're using the point, you're pressing down and then lifting. Watercolor really just takes time. I mean, anything in life, it just takes time. But once you start to get the hang of it, it's really amazing. It's so meditative. I actually discovered this style when we were on vacation, and I just wanted something to do to pass the time between we got home from fishing and we were waiting for dinner to start. And now I'm gonna just put one of these guys down here to fill this little gap. Okay, lovely. This is looking good. We wanna keep going, and we definitely want something that's darker saturation down here. And I love my little fluffy flowers. I don't know what these are, but grab some saturated paint. It's not gonna be your most saturated, it's gonna be like your medium saturation, but we wanna add some darkness over here. And with these guys, I do these marks like this and kind of do it in a cup shape. And maybe put a little more water. And you wanna leave some space in between so it looks like petals. They're really just like I don't know what they are. I just kind of made them up. There we go, and we'll let it dry so we can add those details. Now, while this is drying, we can come up here and add some of those fun details. Remember I said we wanted to give this just a little tiny bit to dry? Well, now we wanna go in with this level saturation. So very, very saturated. And just with the tip of my brush, I'm connecting these all. And it's nice because some of them are still wet, so it bleeds a little bit, but I'm connecting them all with these little branches. And something else I like to do is just add in a couple little dots. Make it look a little interesting. Okay, now let's come up to this little maybe Icelandic poppy, and we're getting really dark saturation, and we're just tapping with our brush, little dots, and then we wanna make those lines that are in the petals. This one down here is a cup shape. So when I make a line, it's gonna be a cup or curved. Curve, curve, curve. And then when I get up here, just slightly curved. This is a great way to make it more interesting since we're just working with one color. And then the same thing for this one, we are going to put those super saturated lines. And it's gonna really pop because there's varying saturation levels in this. I'm just using the very, very tip of my brush. All right, now we're gonna come down to these leaves, and they just have this little line in the middle that is super saturated. Make them pop. And something I like to do, instead of just making the line connect all the way, which is fine, but to add a little more interest, just skipping sometimes. So just skipping a space in between. I know it seems so simple, but sometimes it makes a big difference. We're gonna come over here, do the same thing over here. And then this guy in the middle, we're gonna make those little dots. It's a lot more open in the middle, so we have a lot more space to make those. And then again, the lines. You don't want all the lines to be the same length. Make some of them smaller, some of them longer, but we're using that pretty dark saturation level. And you can't forget about our little chamomile flower in here. Let's just connect in some of those little leaves. Okay, let's keep going. Definitely probably want to fill in something here, but we can wait for a second. Now that we have our top done, we want to keep going down, and I think I'm gonna put my next big bloom here, and then actually I'm gonna put my next big bloom here and this one here. So if you want, you can turn your paper if it's not taped down. Otherwise, we can just kind of tweak our arm a little bit. But instead of just coming down this way, I'm gonna start building from here and go back up. So I'm gonna make this same flower. I'm gonna press down. I want it to come right into this corner. So I'm using the tip, I'm pressing down. And my brushes need just a little extra water today. It's kind of dry where I live. That's another thing too, is I can't tell you exactly how much water you need because it really depends on where you live. Sometimes we live coastal, there's a lot of humidity, but we ran the air conditioning last night because it was hot. So now the house is all dry. So I think I'm needing extra water today. All right, we have this guy here, and then we want to do our other big bloom. Now I wouldn't do one that was open again. I would do one that had this side petal. But if I do this facing up, I feel like it might be a little boring. Or if I do it the exact same way, I'm gonna turn it this way. And I actually need a little more paint, which I'm surprised by because I typically don't, but adding just a little more paint to my palette. And the first thing I'm gonna do is, because I messed up with this little petal here, I'm gonna do the petal that's gonna be the furthest to the right so I can backtrack from there. Just making that petal come out like so. And then I'm going to make my little cup. Some days my brushes just really flow, but today I'm struggling a little bit with this one. Then we want to have our other big petals. You want to make your flowers relatively the same size. We don't want one to be ginormous. And I'm talking about when you're working within the same style of flower. Obviously, these are smaller. These are smaller, we want that. But when you're working in the same style flower, you want to make it similar in size. Okay, which this one got a little bigger, but that's okay. Okay, since this is wet, I'm gonna drop in just a little, I just love how it bleeds. Drop in a little color like that. Okay, lovely. We only have one of these fluffy flowers, and I'm really about symmetry, and I think it's important to try to not have just one of something when you're doing a painting like this. And I'm gonna add in another one over here. That's, oh wait, do I wanna do that? Yeah. Another thing, you guys, don't be so hard on yourself. It's totally fine if you make a mistake. Mistakes are how you learn. If you don't make mistakes and everything is perfect, then you must not be human. But let yourself experiment, it's okay. Because then next time you'll realize, oh, I don't want to do that because when I did that last time, it didn't look good. All right, we have a fluffy flower over there. It's kind of looking crazy, but that's okay. I want to show you guys really quick. So we're going to come in with super saturation, just the tip of our brush or a small brush if you have one. And we are going to add in our little petal lines. We'll really make this come to life. You never want to do just straight up and down. you want it to have just a little bit of a curve. It really helps it to look more rounded. And you could even put in, if you want, a couple little dots. If you want, but you don't have to. This one kind of went crazy over here, but that's okay. Now, we haven't seen these leaves for a while, and we're gonna wanna add some in here. Let's add those in. I'm gonna do one this way and one that way. So whenever we do leaves, we use our point, we press down, we pull up. So, there we go. Lovely. Let's do another one. It can be smaller. All right. I love these leaves so much, so I would like to do more of those. And I think I'm going to have it, come in like that. I think that's gonna be our best bet. Grab that light saturation. First, make the little branch. And remember, we're using our most watered down color. I really love this together. It reminds me of Valentine's Day. That like super, super light pink and then the hot pink. I love Valentine's Day. I used to act like I hated it when I was in high school because I was like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. But it's not even about the like lover part of it. It's about, I just love the theme of it and how pink and bubbly it is. I just love that. Okay, we have that leaf, and now we need to fill in some more fillers. My rule about having at least 2 of something on the painting is coming back. We need this again, and this is our little wisteria run. I'm thinking that probably right here is going to be the best area for it. So just those little bubbles or whatever doodads, I don't know what they are. Okay. And for the rest of this, I want to do these because I love these guys. I think they're so pretty. Again, it's that super, super light saturation, and you're just making those little dots, those little round petals. And don't forget some to just be a bud and some to maybe be just the sides. So maybe it's just 3 petals together. And just fill in that. And it's gonna look super, super light. You might not even be able to see mine when I'm painting, but it works. And I am gonna fill in any area that kind of looks open. I'm gonna fill it in with these little guys. So there's some open space over here. If you want to do this again on your own, I don't know if I mentioned this in the beginning, but I recommend picking some florals that you want to paint. You could totally do this, just start like without knowing, but sometimes in the beginning it's helpful to do it that way so it doesn't feel quite as overwhelming. Just adding these. Okay. Looking good. Now we are going to come back into these with our deepest saturation on just the tip of our brush. And we're going to make those little lines again. Little branches that are connecting them. The reason you want to make sure it's semi-dry is because if it's not a little bit dry, it just bleeds in and it's just one big blob. Same thing if you were gonna come in here, you want it to be at least almost dry, if not completely dry. So let's make those lines. And this is actually my favorite part to come back in and make the little details. It really makes it all come together. Let's come over to this fluffy flower, and we're adding in these little veins in the leaves. And maybe some little dots, if you want that. Over to our big bloom, making the pollen in the middle, or stamen. You guys always tell me what it is. I always say it wrong. And you could do this, like I said, with any color. And you're only using one color, you're just getting a great lesson in saturation levels and how beautiful you can create something so beautiful using that. Back down here, we are going to put the lines into this one. I'm just using the tip of my brush, and I'm very saturated. And there's my dog barking. Now let's come into our these little guys, chamomile flowers, forget-me-nots, and we're gonna do, I'm sorry, I can't control my dog's barking right now. And okay, and let's just start off by adding in those little dots wherever the little flower is open completely. We have some down here, we have some down here. And it's pretty dry, so it's not bleeding really. But if you wanted it to bleed, just get in there before it gets dry. Now we're gonna do those nice little branches. And this is a great way to fill in. And then we'll add those leaves at the end. And they don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be like, oh, well, there wouldn't be a branch here because there's no flower. Don't worry about that. This is like more like abstract in nature. I wouldn't say it's really completely abstract, but give yourself a little license, artistic license. Put some of these guys up here. I'm just gonna, anywhere I kind of see some gaps, I'm gonna add some of these. All right, and then our last step is we want to add those little leaves. Just taking the tip of my brush and I'm just pressing down like boop. It's very light, very, very light. Like I said, this part is my favorite, adding in the details at the end, because it really makes the whole thing come together. And that's a big thing with watercolor, but with art in general, is everything, you kind of have to wait. A lot of people give up on their pieces of artwork and paintings because they give up too early. And sometimes you just gotta stick with it until the end. I just did a tutorial recently and I was following somebody else. It was for gouache. And I thought, oh my God, this looks so bad. I wanted to quit. I'm like, there's no way this is gonna look good. I'm not even joking. The very last step she had us do was what made it look amazing. So don't give up. Sometimes it's that very last step. Life lesson. All right, you guys. So our painting is done. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you use tape, just take that tape off. It's so satisfying. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know in the comments, and I hope that you do this again and play with all the different saturation levels and know that you can make a beautiful piece of artwork with just one tube of paint.